And for those of you joining us from around the world, welcome to another episode of the Nonprofit Show. We are delighted to have you join us today here on a Friday. And I always love when Tony Beall gets to come on. I got to give you a little hint. I don't control the booking schedule. That's something that Jarrett does. But oftentimes when I see your name on, I'll kick her off and put myself on. So you found me out. But
It's an honor. It's always, I sound totally redundant every time we get together, but it's because it's the truth and it's the way I always feel. I'm always honored to be here with you or with Jarrett or with the two of you combined. That's always pretty powerful
yeah,
and fun.
yeah,
But it's always an honor to be here. And I love the conversation, really
yeah.
do.
I do too. Well, we again, if you don't know who Tony Bell is, he's the senior director of fundraising of the Relationship Center Fundraising Academy at National University. He's an expert in the field of leadership within the nonprofit sector, cause selling. You've been an executive director, a fundraiser, now in the higher educational field. So I always love your perspective because I feel like you've been there at all levels and can really speak to what's going on. Now, Ask and Answered is not specifically tied to fundraising. We have a heck of a lot of questions that come in at fundraising, but we have questions that come in from HR to accounting to board development. And so when you're in the hot seat with us, you never know what you're going to get. Hey, thanks so much to our participating sponsors, many who have been with us from the get go, including Bloomerang, American Nonprofit Academy, Your Part Time Controller, Be Generous, Fundraising Academy at National University, Staffing Boutique, Nonprofit Thought Leader, and Nonprofit Nerd. These are the folks that join us day in and day out. More than 600 episodes that are now produced and found on our archive, which includes Roku, YouTube TV, or excuse me, YouTube, not YouTube TV, YouTube, Amazon Fire TV, and Vimeo. And as Jarrett always likes to say, but wait, there's more. We now have all of our current episodes on podcast. Those files are turned into a podcast. And again, each one of our episodes is uploaded within the day, 3 to 4 hours, and you can access that archive or share it with somebody who you think might be able to be helped with it. Okay, now you know how I get super excited when there's a name withheld, because that's always like the juicy stuff, right? And I'll fess up. Sometimes I elect to take somebody's name off because I feel like, ooh, if they're coming from a small community, somebody might know who they are, and so. But anyway, Portland, Oregon. Can you address the issue of a new CEO bringing with them their portfolio of donors? We have a potential new hire, while they might not be the best fit, seems to come with a large and impressive connection to major funder and donors. From Portland, Oregon. You know, I think this has got to be a question or a situation that a lot of nonprofits deal with. You
Yeah, I
know,
think so. Yeah, I don't think that this scenario is unique to Portland or unique
no.
to Oregon at
Mm-mm.
all. And it's very interesting, I think, in today's, particularly as I was talking earlier about this landscape that we're working and living in right now. I think this is a very interesting question, particularly when you look at what's going on in terms of employment and the opportunities out there, and how someone may use this to leverage themselves not only as a top candidate, but may use this to leverage their price points for their salary. The questions, again, this has been happening for decades. It's not new. But I think it's a particularly interesting question given the employment landscape. Again, regardless of what market you're serving or supporting. So a couple of things that I think about this. I think about one of the early things that I learned in board source training, and I often refer to board source, just a tremendous resource for professional development. Uh, but there's a phrase that was said during that workshop, that people give to people, that support great causes. And of course, that phrase supports cause selling and the whole relationship driven, concept and direction of cause selling. So the CEO may in fact have a portfolio of people that support people,
Mm-hmm.
right? That support great
Right.
causes.
Right.
Uh, but I would be hesitant uh, in terms of my expectations of that portfolio,
Okay.
because even though people give to people, when people give, they still have to feel passionate about the cause that their investment is supporting. They still have to feel good about the ethics of the organization, right? There are still a lot of things a donor has to feel good about, with a nonprofit organization before they're willing to make an investment. So it's an interesting question. I think it's great if someone says they have a portfolio. If they have 100 folks in that portfolio, maybe five will support maybe five will.
Wow,
Right,
what
right
an
away. I'm
interesting
just
thing.
throwing that out. Maybe none of them will. There is no guarantee that
Right.
anyone in that portfolio is going to commit to investing in the new organization and investing in that mission.
Along the lines, you said something that really resonated with me, and that is I can see a board sitting around a table saying, "Holy moly, this is going to solve all our problems. Get them in, and they're going to be checks." And but the reality is, the ROR, return on relationship. This could take a long time. It's not just a guarantee that, they start making phone calls and bringing in the checks. I mean, so that's another aspect of this is time served is going to have to be factored into this.
Right. And also, be reminded, we're not hiring an ATM.
That's great. Oh my God. Quote of the day. We are not hiring an ATM. I love that, Tony.
So
Yes.
there are many other uh,
Yeah.
attributes
Yeah.
and considerations when you're hiring someone at a C-suite level.
Right. Very, very interesting. Well, name withheld in Portland. I hope this gives you some perspective because, wow, to quote Tony Bell, we're not hiring an ATM. That's awesome. That we need to all be saying that. I mean, because that's probably the genesis and the attitude behind that question. Okay, Chantal from Baltimore, Maryland writes in, are you in favor of having age limits on board members? For example, a board member must be no younger than 30 years old and no older than 65 years old. We are reviewing bylaws and need to address this.
This was a very interesting question. So, uh, and I, again, different markets, different
Yeah.
personalities on
Yeah.
boards, all kinds of conversations, right? I, for me, I am not in favor of anything that is going to minimize a variety of voices and experiences at the table for your nonprofit organization. So let me just start
Okay.
there.
Okay.
Uh, that in my initial reading uh, of this question, looking at it here as you're reading it, my initial response was, well, wow, that doesn't support diversity, equity, and inclusion. It certainly doesn't support inclusion if you're going to say, folks of a certain age cannot serve on our board. I would say at a minimum, 18 years of age, right? That's,
For legal.
that's when you're legal.
Yeah.
So at a minimum for 18, I don't know the value of putting a maximum. I just really don't know. Now, there may be something unique in the mission. There may be something unique in the community being served, where that might be a problem and have to be the stimulus for this kind of conversation.
Right.
Uh, but basically, again, going back to my original statement, I typically am not in favor of or support anything that minimizes the level of participation that can be had and that would minimize the voices and representation. Uh, yeah.
Yeah. I, and reading this question, I'm thinking about one of my earliest board uh, trustee experiences. We had a trustee on our board who was 91, and she was one of the sharpest voices in the room. She was incredibly wealthy, so she funded a lot of things in times of duress. And so, I would never want to think of her as an ATM, but when I reflect upon this, I think she probably had that. But one of the aspects of what she brought to our board was phenomenal historical context. And so that was always something that we drew upon. And that landscape that she provided, which was national, was invaluable. So my sense of it, Chantal, would be, and I don't know, Tony, this is just like off the cuff, wackadoo idea, but most term limits, let's say they're 3 years and you vote every 3 years. Maybe after the age of 65 or 70, you pull that back to 2 years or something like that. So that if you feel there's an incapacitation issue and that board member is not being able to be a fiduciary, maybe because of their abilities as it relates to aging, maybe
Sure.
put that in. I don't know. I work with a lot of financial institutions. In fact, I'm doing a big training for the Credit Union Executive Society next week. And this is a question, that they bring up
Mm.
with their older, trustees. And you read about this in the Wall Street Journal all the time about, these national boards of for-profit companies and
Uh-huh.
seeing how their board members are aging and what do you do. It's kind of an interesting concept, but the way you phrased it about putting limits on something, yeah, you know.
Yeah, and I was really glad, Julie. I was going to bring it up if you didn't, but that's why we have term limits. So if there's some concern, I mean, again, they're not getting seated on the Supreme Court. This is not a lifetime service to the organization.
Woo!
So again, your bylaws, should, as a best practice, have term limits. But then, as a best practice, you need to exercise those term limits and have sometimes those tough conversations.
And along those lines, the tough conversations, courageous conversations,
Courageous. Thank you.
wouldn't you agree that this is the board chair responsibility? So the board chair, if they see a board member, and I don't care what age,
Right.
struggling, not being able to meet expectations, that's when you have to step up and say, privately, right?
Sure.
Privately. Hey, I noticed, some concerns. Is there something that we can do to help you? Is this a time when maybe, you need to reflect upon leaving the board or what that might look or changing your role within our leadership? And that to me, Tony, and I don't know what you think about that, but this is a board chair, not a CEO, not a CEO, but
100%. No,
okay.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the responsibility of the board chair, 100%.
Yeah, which is not easy. It's not easy.
No, it's not.
I mean, that's
No, it's not.
that's why a lot of people don't immediately sign up or raise their hand. Okay,
Well,
let's
and,
go.
and it's well, just real quickly, Julia,
Yeah.
because I had the honor of doing board training for a local nonprofit this past weekend.
Mhm.
And one of the things that I always talk about in board training is that, the realization that, board members are volunteers,
Yes.
right? But volunteers with the highest level of accountability to the
Yes.
organization. So we talked a lot about that and,
Mhm.
and the needs of boards. But yeah, it's good to recognize, right? It could be a challenging role,
Yeah. Oh my
and
God.
and
Yeah.
and they're volunteering their time to do it.
Yeah. And it's their fiduciary role too. Let me
Oh,
just
for sure.
throw that in. Not that we're
Yeah.
trying to scare anyone, but yeah, that's
No.
it is getting close to Halloween. Okay. Joshua from Salt Lake City writes in, I recently had a donor who I am new to tell me that he could tell, oh, this is interesting, I was trained in selling. The way he said it was not so kind. It made me feel uncomfortable, and I did not have a response. Yes, I'm trained, but I see it as a good thing. Can you give me some advice? You know what? This happened to me years ago, and I was probably in my 30s. I was asking for $1 million gift, just as a volunteer, community volunteer,
Mhm.
and the guy said to me, it was a man. older man, of course, said to me, "Well, I can tell you must have sold cars in your past." And first of all, I was like, "Well, he was demeaning the car salesperson,
Sure, let's start
which
there,
I was
right?
like, wow, that's a knock to anybody who's ever sold a car," which I didn't appreciate. But Joshua, I was so taken aback, I didn't have a response. And so,
It's
Tony,
tough.
what do you say about this?
No, I really appreciate the question from Joshua, and and I empathize because that's a really awkward
Yeah,
situation, to be in. Particularly, Joshua's let us know that a donor that he's new to,
doesn't know.
so really, really
Yeah.
uncomfortable, right? So I think there are a couple of different things that come to mind right away. Uh, One is to own up to it and say, yes, I am trained.
Yeah.
Our organization takes my work very seriously, and or just, again, not in a defensive way, but really uplifting the fact that yes, I am trained. It's important for us to be trained, to be the best we can be, to ensure that our communities are receiving the services that they so desperately need, right? So there are ways, I think, uh, to celebrate, yes, I am trained,
Mhm.
and I'm proud of that.
I was just going to say, and I'm proud of that.
And I'm
I
proud
like
of
that you
that.
said that. Yeah,
And
I'm proud
here's
of it.
why my training is important,
Hmm.
right? So I mean, again, there's a lot of nuance involved in even this question. We weren't there, and there's again, I don't want to. I'm just offering some recommendations here, not having sat there. So I would do that. I would, proudly own up to, yes, I have been trained. This may also be an opportunity, Julia, for something that you and I talked about earlier, around the importance of taking what we learn in professional development and learning how to utilize that in our own voice, in our own
Yeah.
style, how to
Okay.
take our professional development and show up as our authentic self.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, we have a bunch of folks, trained in cost selling, that all are walking around sounding like robots, just reciting, the same exact thing that they read in the textbook, or that, they learned in a cohort, or
Right.
on a webinar. Uh, so maybe Joshua might want to, again, this may not have been the scenario, but for others it might be, again, to think about when you are activating what you have learned in your training, how much of you is coming through in that, or how much of it is you just kind of projecting canned phrases that you learned, or something. So there may be something to that for Joshua to consider.
So for those of you who weren't with us in the green room chatter, um, uh, Fundraising Academy just sent me one of their textbooks, and the textbook is this is an older version. The textbook is being redone and rebranded and yada yada yada. But I mean, the guts of it and the information is still there. And I was telling Tony, again, green room chatter where we just chat about whatever. Um, I was stunned at how many like extra things that, oh wow, that would have helped me and I can see that. Or, oh yeah, I kind of use that, but I don't use this. And so Tony said a really magical thing to me. He said, yeah, you can't just repeat everything. You need to absorb it and then determine what fits into your style. And once he said that, I was like, yeah, okay, I can take that in and see. I want to go back now and reread this. You can tell, Tony, I've like made all these notes with my sticky notes, but because I was thinking, oh man, I missed the boat. I haven't been doing this right. So I think it's an interesting thing. I would also say to Joshua, there are more and more people, Tony, and I don't know if you're seeing this, that now have achieved the CFRE designation. And it elevates the entire sector when we can have a professional designation that says, yeah, we do train, we do, increase our abilities to perform and to be measured, and this is a profession. And so it's kind of an interesting thing. And yeah, sorry, Josh, but I hope that helps. I really do.
Yeah, I hope it helps Joshua as well.
I think it's going to come back. Don't you think this isn't? I mean, has somebody ever said that to you?
Um, no, actually, I don't know that I have ever been confronted with that particular question that I went through cause selling or any training and was, was kind of called out and accused of being too trained.
I love you're just too trained. I
You're
love it.
just too trained.
You're just too trained. Oh my God, that's crazy. Okay, let's go to Shonda in Dallas, Texas. If I have a chance to get a donor to attend one of our school events, namely a play, or take them out to a nice lunch, which is better? During the lunch, we can talk. During the play, we can't. Also, this is a high school, so the performance is at a high school level, if you know what I mean. I think this is fascinating because this is like taking that donor on a tour of your programming. And, yeah, this is really an interesting question.
Come on, Shonda, if you know what I mean. You know Dallas Got Talent. I don't know why you said if you know what I mean. But so I think this is interesting. Normally what I would say is anytime you can get a donor to uh particularly for those organizations that have a brick and mortar that they can show off or programming that where they can invite someone to come in and see the programming taking place or experience the programming. I think that that's a huge win. So, maybe in this scenario, Shonda does lunch and then at lunch extends the invitation to attend the play. So
Mhm,
maybe that's, something that
mhm,
Shonda can consider.
mhm.
Again, leaning into what do you know about, the potential donor? Are
Yeah.
they even going to enjoy the play? A couple of things, but some people cannot stand a musical. So are you inviting them to a musical where they have to get the whole story and song? That's not going to be a good experience for them, where others are like, don't bring me to Kill a Mockingbird. I can't listen to all of that.
Yeah,
I need something I can tap my toe to. So again,
right.
understanding your, your donor, and no disrespect. That was just To Kill a Mockingbird. That was just the
No,
first thing that came
no,
to mind,
but you're right.
you know, but
No, I
uh,
get it.
again, leaning into what do you know about the donor? What has your cause selling and you're building the relationship taught you about that donor?
Mhm.
And are they going to find the play even a good experience?
Right. One of the things that I did with donors for a cultural organization I was involved with, as a board member, I would bring prospective folks that we wanted to engage to rehearsals. And so that then they could see, it wasn't real sexy, but most people had never been, behind a stage or in a rehearsal room or standing that close to an opera singer where you can like literally feel the impact of their voice. And so I then felt like I didn't have, and this is going to sound so hateful, but I didn't feel like I had to apologize for a performance, right? Like, oh, that was a snoozer, right?
I think that's
But
brilliant.
but then you could see how hard it is and how they get stopped. No, do that again. No, stop, do that again. I mean, it was a very interesting, and it was interesting thing for me too. But so the rehearsal part, and then you can do both. Maybe you can go to lunch and you can do rehearsal.
You know what? I love the idea of the rehearsal more so than seeing the actual
Oh yeah,
presentation, because what you see then is the dynamic between, teacher and student, the dynamic between student and student. And
yeah.
I think depending on the mission of the program or the organization, uh, yeah, that would be really impactful for a donor. Again, even more so than the final product.
Yeah. I
I
did
think that
that.
was brilliant, Julia. I love that.
Well, I did that with also with Ballet Arizona, and brought some people in. And when you watch ballet and you're like, oh, that's so lovely, and then when you see how brutal it is, up close. I mean, and what the toll is on their bodies, and how they're just like pouring sweat, all the things that you would never see sitting in the theater. Then that was, to me, that was always magical. We could always
Yeah,
get these checks because people would be like, I had no idea how hard this was. It's like, yeah,
yeah, yeah.
these are athletes.
Dancers are athletes.
Yeah,
Exactly. That's
yeah,
exactly what I was going to say.
yeah, and it's dangerous. it's dangerous. I mean, when you see a lift from the auditorium, you're like, oh, how lovely. But when you see the lift, you're like, holy crap, don't drop her. You know what I mean? It was a really interesting thing. I always loved doing that, Tony. I always did.
Well, I think too, and the perception that, all dancers are light as a feather, right? So it's easy to just, yeah, but no, dancers are, it's muscle there. That muscle has weight. So
Yeah, and I think it's one of the things we did a couple times, which was interesting for a cultural organization, is that we actually had meetings or dinners on the stage. Because most people that supported these organizations, they'd never been on a stage. They'd never been in the wings. They never saw how dark it was or how all the things you can trip over or, the things coming around. And so we found that when we could get people engaged in that piece of it, they were much more receptive to joining with us. Just like if you take somebody to an after school program and you see what the kids look like after coming in after, off the bus from a long day at school and what they need and how hungry they are. And it changes your perception of after school programming. So it could kind of just be a different type of engagement. But
sure.
wow, Tony, this
Great
day,
questions.
yeah, the really good questions. Always make sure you send us your questions. You can call us, you can email us, you can use social media. We're going out more and more, and I'm having people stop me at events and say, Julia, will you pose this question? Which is kind of fun too. So, yeah, get us your questions and let us know what's on your mind. A real quick, interesting thing that we're going to be doing next week is a nonprofit power week with your part-time controller. And so if you've got questions about the changing nature of financial leadership within your organization, send them our way. Now, we're not going to ask you, we're not going to answer questions about, what should I put on line form, line two on form 13892Z. We're not going to be able to do that. But if you have some questions about leadership in that changing part of the nonprofit world, we'd love to discuss those. Again, Tony Beall, oh my God, Senior Director, Relationship Center, Fundraising Academy at National University. You are a national treasure, my friend.
You are too kind. Thank you so much. I can't believe how quickly the time goes, Julia.
I know, it really does. I have to say, even Jarrett and I, after now almost 3 years of this, even we get shocked, Tony. I mean,
I'm sure.
we in our studios, we both have very big clocks because we're always like, what? Time's up. So, anyway, National University has a really interesting thing going on, My Learning Portal. You can go on there and see all the different things that they have going on. And let me tell you, most of this is free.
Mhm.
So it is remarkable access to great thought leaders about fundraising in our country, really around the world, but especially in our country, and how socially we can do things with our communities. And it's just been a marvelous thing to see you all grow and to work with us. So check out Fundraising Academy, and the way you get to them is fundraising-academy.org. They are under the umbrella of National University, and then from there you can gain free access to so much information. And so we want to make sure that everybody can understand how to get more of this amazing content that we just love and adore. We want to make sure to thank all of our presenting sponsors: Bloomerang, American Nonprofit Academy, your part-time controller, Be Generous, Fundraising Academy at National University, Staffing Boutique, Nonprofit Thought Leader, and Nonprofit Nerd. These are the folks that allow us to come to you day in and day out. It's just been remarkable and continues to be so.
And I just love and have so much respect for these other organizations that step up and sponsor, opportunities like this for folks to get, additional professional learning and professional development. Their commitment to professional development in the nonprofit space is definitely something to be celebrated.
Thank you. That's a great way to say it. We were talking to the folks, we had a guest from Bloomerang on yesterday, and
Uh-huh.
one of the things I was saying to him was I was like, you all are so brilliant at sharing knowledge. A lot of organizations, especially data-based and data-facing
Right.
organizations, they don't want to share. They want to keep their secrets, and they're very transparent and want to build the sector. And so most all of our sponsors and the folks that we work with have that same spirit. And so
Mhm.
that's a cool thing. Thank you for mentioning that. Hey, as we end every episode, and especially going into the weekend, we want to remind everyone to stay well so you can do well. We'll see you back here next week. Have a great weekend, my friend.
You as well. Thank you.